Hey scholars, this is Mr. Dillman, your fellow White Oak High School science teacher. I'm here with my fellow alumni, Central Michigan University alumni, Brett Alger, and we are going to do an interview today. Since he couldn't be with you in person for a guest speaker, we're going to do this kind of video style. So I'm going to ask you the first question, Brett. Describe your current position for NOAA, what you work for.
Well, my position, I'm a fisheries management specialist for NOAA Fisheries. NOAA stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and so the broad agency looks over the oceans and weather and habitat. But specifically, I work in the National Marine Fisheries Service under NOAA, which is NOAA Fisheries. And NOAA Fisheries is broken up into a number of different regions. There's one in the Northwest. There's Alaska. There's the Southwest. There's the Hawaiian Islands. I work up in the Northeast, so we manage the ocean for commercial fisheries from Maine to North Carolina. And then specifically in my position as a fisheries management specialist, I work on ground fish, so cod, haddock, pollock, various flounder species.
Excellent. What kind of degree is appropriate if one were to follow in your career path?
Well, specifically my career path, I was a biology major at Central Michigan, and then I continued on to Michigan State University, where I got a master's degree in fisheries management science. But there's a number of people that I work with that have varying backgrounds. A guy I work with, he went to Mass Maritime Academy, and he's went into law enforcement. He was a Marine police officer. He does the same job I do right now. There's other people that I know that went to school in some of the Carolina schools, like Duke in North Carolina, that went into like marine policy. So they didn't necessarily get their hands dirty and wet and work on boats and get into research, but they came from a more policy type background. So to get to my position, there's a bunch of roads to get there, I would say.
Okay. Do you see yourself staying at your current position long term, or is it kind of a short term deal?
Well, I would say the position I have is a long-term job. I could stay there for the next 30 years and retire. But just like anybody else, you have different goals, and you'd like to move up the chain, so to speak. So right now I like where I'm at, but I certainly have my eye on maybe other areas around the country, maybe to go work in the Northwest or Alaska doing the same type of job, but just on different fisheries. And then certainly being from Michigan, it's always nice to look back to the Great Lakes and see what positions and jobs they have back there through NOAA.
Definitely. What do you like most about your job, and what would you say you like the least?
I think the thing I like the most about my job is getting to interact with people. I constantly am getting phone calls and emails from fishermen from, like I said, North Carolina to Maine. People that live on remote islands up in Maine lobster fishing, and people that are down here in North Carolina fishing for black sea bass. So I like to talk with people, help them out. The regulations that we use are very complicated. So I like that the most, the communication, helping out fishermen.
And school teachers, right?
And school teachers.
Yeah.
The least, though, is certainly a lot of the guys we work with, they're out to make a living, right? They're commercial fishermen. So if we make decisions that either cut back the number of fish they're allowed to keep, or the different things that we do to try and regulate the fishery at whole, if that cuts into somebody's wallet, their pocketbook, their income, you're certainly, you may be putting people out of business, or you're making it a little bit harder for them. And so it's a fine balance. But it certainly is one of the least things that I like about my job is really affecting people's pocketbook and their families.
How did you get into this kind of career? What inspired you to kind of go into this career?
Well, actually, when I was at Central Michigan, I was walking down a hallway and I saw a job employment board with some jobs posted on the wall, and one of them was working for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, the DNR, working on the Great Lakes. So I called them up, sent them my resume, and got the job. And sure enough, I spent the rest of the summer working on research boats, cutting open fish, measuring fish, working at fish tournaments, all kinds of just hands-on research for the Great Lakes. And it certainly kind of led me on. I went and worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service. I worked for the Illinois DNR, and things have just kind of spurred along. And I guess I just like fish. I like being outside, and I like trying to manage a natural resource, I guess you could say, for the greater good. So
it sounds like you've been in a lot of places, done a lot of different things. You've seen a lot of different organisms. What would you say your favorite aquatic organism that you've worked with so far, and why would you say so?
That's a good question. I worked in the Great Lakes on sea lamprey. They're kind of a lesser known fish. but they're from the Atlantic. They got their way through the Great Lakes system, and they're an invasive in the Great Lakes. And we treated streams to try and get rid of them because they prey upon lake trout and salmon in the Great Lakes. So that's the one I definitely worked with a lot that is very interesting. But I also find lobster really interesting. It's an insect, essentially. It's a bug. And people pay a lot of money to eat lobster. And it's a big market. And people make millions and millions of dollars off of lobster. And so I've really found those things to be interesting. But given that I'm new to the East Coast, I don't know that much about lobster. I mean, I know what they look like, a little bit of their life history. But they're a pretty amazing creature. So those are cool too.
So you worked for NOAA for a little while. What would you say NOAA's main goals are for the future? What are they looking to accomplish? And maybe what are some other jobs that someone could partake in with NOAA?
Well, like I said earlier, NOAA does many things besides just fisheries. They keep track of the weather and oceanographic data, buoy data, weather, ocean currents and patterns, temperature. They do a lot of stuff with habitat, so protecting shoreline, eelgrass, bottom, sediment, all that kind of stuff. One of the big things that they've recently come out with, or starting to come out with, is marine spatial planning. It's probably a term you may hear in the future. It's basically to try and figure out, okay, who gets to use the ocean, when, why, how, where, all that kind of stuff. Because there's people out there trying to fish in the ocean. There's people out there trying to maybe harvest natural resources like natural gas or oil. There's shipping channels, shipping lanes. There's cruise ships, pleasure boaters, recreational fishermen. There's a lot of people using the ocean. And so one of NOAA's new tasks into the future is marine spatial planning. So how do you allot the fishermen the areas they want to fish, and allot the people that want to go after natural gas and oil and do all that kind of stuff.
So kind of ocean scheduling, pretty much.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So that's a big one that's kind of NOAA-wide. One of the things that our agency, specifically the National Marine Fisheries Service, is we have a catch share policy. So it's basically a type of management system that President Obama and Dr. Jamie Lubchenco, who's the head of NOAA, has implemented to state this is kind of our policy and where we would like to see fisheries management go. And that's a policy that's, you'd see in Alaska and Hawaii, in the Southwest, Southeast, in the Northeast where I'm at.
My class, we've looked at with the APES, different types of commercial fishing, and that's what you deal with most. We looked at long lining and drift netting mostly being kind of a very, very heavy bycatch type thing with a lot of die off. Do you think that long lining and drift netting fishing should be illegal?
Well, it depends. I mean, any type of fishing could be illegal if it's done the wrong way. Meaning, in terms of, what's the season that you're fishing. So you could fish in an area during a certain time of the year where there isn't any bycatch because the whales aren't there, the sharks aren't there, the birds aren't there. And so, there's a lot of factors involved in just this specific gear type. Additionally, what's the size of the hook? What type of hook is it? How deep are you setting the hooks? What is the type of mesh that's made out of the net? How wide is the net? How tall is the net? How deep are you setting it? There's a lot of factors involved in catching fish and then also bycatch, other than the gear, gear specific. And so if it's done properly, if it's done, a lot of research-based information comes, it goes into it. You can fish, long line appropriately and legally and without or very little bycatch. And so we have a number of fishermen, the sword fishermen, they typically use long line, and it's been done sustainably, and it's been approved by all the various agencies. So it's hard to say that one gear type should just be completely banned, because there are people that do it the right way, they do it sustainably, and they abide by all the laws and rules that we set forth.
Okay, so it sounds like that would be one type of controversial issue that always people are asking with. What is the most controversial issue that NOAA is dealing with now, would you say?
Well, in my region, we have about 1,500 groundfish boats from Maine to North Carolina. And we've implemented a catch share system, like I said a minute ago, catch share policy, that basically states for the entire year, each vessel gets a certain number of pounds of fish to catch, whether that's 10,000 or 100,000 or whatever it is each boat has been given. That's what they're allowed to catch for the year, whether they fish that out in 2 days or 100 days or 300 days. And so one thing that's been very controversial is how we've proportioned who gets to catch what. And so because maybe some boats have only been allocated a smaller amount of fish, that maybe doesn't allow them to make as much money as they like. Conversely, there's been boats that have been given a lot of fish to catch, and those types of people are making potentially millions of dollars. So you get a system where you have haves and have-nots. And so it's very controversial. I get people calling me talking about, they're trying to make their boat payment or their house payment or their truck payment, or, they had to lay off some crew, or they had to change boats, or they've had to make these big life decisions based on some of the fishing policies that we've put into place. And so the controversy has risen to the level of the president. We've had congressmen in Maine and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and all the New England states kind of sending letters to Congress, sending letters to the president to try and get some resolution to the problem. And so it's very controversial right now.
Well, it sounds like just with your neck of the woods, there could be a lot of illegal activity overall with setting those kind of boundaries. What do you see as the most illegal activity have you seen with your job, or the most common, and what do you do about it?
Well, we have an enforcement division that tries to regulate the rules that we put in place. Some of the stuff that I've heard that guys kind of tell me, but it's kind of off the record, certainly guys come in at night and they sell their fish to a fish dealer, a fish house, when they're not supposed to be. And then a lot of times the thing that I run into that's most common is all the fishing that these guys do, they have to report to us. They send us a boat report, and the dealers that buy the fish send us a dealer report. Well, if you're a fisherman and you maybe caught a bunch of fish but you don't want us to know, and you got a buddy that runs a dealer and he's kind of cool with it, you might have a situation where a fisherman sells fish to a dealer, none of it gets reported to us, and so we don't know that the fish are being caught and being sold. And so how that relates to the previous thing I was just talking about is we gave allocation to your boat and your boat and your boat and your boat based on the fishing history that you reported to us. Well, if you didn't report to us everything that you caught, you can't come back to us in 6 years or 8 years or 10 years and say, hey, wait a minute, I did catch some fish back in 2002. I have the reports to show it. So we have a lot of guys, they call it, selling under the table, where they catch the fish. Maybe there's an 800-pound trip limit on cod, but they caught 900 pounds. And so rather than throw the fish back or just get rid of them, they'll still sell them but not report them to us. So misreporting and underreporting is a big issue that we deal with.
So I don't know if you directly deal with the catching of maybe some of this activity. Does your job ever get very dangerous overall?
Not mine specifically. Now, my job is primarily working in an office. I've kind of gotten all the research and the on the water kind of stuff out of the way now. I did go out on a research boat last spring after a big storm. There was big huge waves and the boat's rocking and you can hardly stand up. So I've gotten a little bit. It was a little dicey, but I wouldn't say it was dangerous. I just probably didn't have my sea legs, I guess, so to speak. But it is a dangerous job. We have people every week or every couple of weeks you hear about Coast Guard reports of a boat getting stranded and needing a rescue. Guys, as recently as a month or two ago, that got swept off the boat and were never found. So it's a dangerous job. Guys are trying to make a buck, and so they go out in potentially bad weather, maybe not a big enough boat for the seas and the conditions, and you get people that are injured and end up perishing too. And
tell them where exactly you're from and relating it to our cinematic arts a little bit.
Yeah, so the town I live in is Gloucester, Massachusetts, which for some of you, if you've seen the movie The Perfect Storm, with who's in that movie again?
I can't think of it.
George Clooney's in that
George
one.
Clooney,
Mark
sure.
Wahlberg.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a story, a real life story about a fishing boat that went out in a nor'easter, some bad seas. So if you've ever seen that movie, go back and watch it. If you don't remember it, or go watch it. It's a really good movie. But the town I live in is the backdrop of that movie, Gloucester.
So definitely an area that could be very dangerous, right?
Yes.
All right, we're going to give Brett a little chance to catch his breath here, and then we'll come back in a little bit and we'll finish up this interview.